So Toke, in a nutshell, what is art of hosting?
Do you want me to
Yes.
look into that or look at you?
Where you want.
So, what is art of hosting? It's a practice. It's rooted in very ancient human practices of getting together and talking about what's important. It's integration maybe of many practices, some deep understanding of the transformative power of listening to yourself, each other, and to engage in what matters, not what doesn't matter. It's being skillful at methodologies, process, architectures of different kinds that can allow people who otherwise would not be able to talk about what matters because they may be afraid of each other or they may be enemies, that skill can be put to good use. And it's also probably, you could say, it's an attitude to not give up on the possibility that we can find the solutions we need to find in our societies, in our organizations, in our families, in our where differences have become so predominant between us that we're beginning to think that we are actually enemies and that we are not all in the same boat and belong to the same race called the human species. And so in one sense it's an integration of, it's the daring suggestion that any human being can call a conversation and make it work, and that we are born with that gift, which is why we call it hosting. Everybody knows how to host something, so it's not a mysterious thing. An art, because in art you don't ever completely get an expert or get to know everything. An artist is always evolving and being playful with it and learning from what you're doing. It's a practice. If you just understand it, you may not be able to practice it. If you approach it as a practice of calling yourself and other people into a good space where we can learn together and become wiser and be more friendly and kind to each other, not to be disrespectful. It doesn't mean that we need to agree about everything. It's not a methodology of just, or a practice that says we all have to think the same or we all have to be the same. That would be foolish at this time in the world. And you could also add maybe that it's a response. If you go back in all the big, powerful transformations that has happened, from the Berlin Wall to fall, from the after the war, the creation of the European Union, they all began with a few people getting together and talking about what mattered, and that they had the intention and the willingness to shift something. And the European Union to me is a peace project. It's not just a coalition of states. It was started by Jean Monnet, who called 5 people to have conversations, and then they called in politicians, and so forth. And out of that, in 65 years, the European Union have begun to tame the violent behavior of 27 nation states, where many of us have been enemies for about 5,000 years. So that's an example, very big example, and was honored by the respectful award of the Nobel Peace Prize being given to the European Union just a couple of months ago. And many people maybe don't understand why that is happening, because now we have financial crisis, and Greece and France, Greece and Spain and Italy are problems of this, but if you go deeper into the history, there will always be problems when 500 million people try to work together. But I'm inspired to see that all through history, in my own country, in Denmark, we rose out of poverty. We went bankrupt in 1813. And through conversations and progressive education, the Danish people came out of despair and established itself as a democratic nation. So, though it sounds very simple, it has huge implications if it's done well. And we're also suggesting not just to be facilitating conversations, but we are asking the question, what's the purpose and the intention behind the conversation? How will it serve the grandchildren and the planet at this time where everything we have known is changing? It is shifting because we're 7 or more than 6 billion people on the planet, and somehow we need to learn how to collaborate in a way that has never been needed before. And so our whole attitude to us and them is being challenged. And I think out of hosting and harvesting conversations that matter, which is what we name this practice, not just hosting, but also harvesting some fruit, some intelligence, some wisdom, some courage, some togetherness, and some rigorous action that could allow us to lead in better ways, share the resources on the planet better, and not waste our time with stupid wars and misuse of power and misuse of the sparse economy that is actually maybe not sparse because there's not enough of energy here. It's sparse because we are not using it wisely. I know that was a long answer, but somehow I wanted to put it into a bigger context.
Yes. And I understand you do this art of hosting worldwide or in very wide surroundings and so on. So from your point of view and from your experience, what was the most impressive experiences with art of hosting? What have you learned so far?
No, there is not just one. There is so many.
Can you name
Not
it?
that I think that art of hosting and harvesting conversations and matter is the answer to everything, but it's definitely not as a movement or as something somebody has invented, but it's just bringing back this ancient practice of when we don't know what to do, we get together, we place a good question in the middle, we create a good space for conversation, we talk, we listen, we create together, and then we find solutions. I have seen this work in the European Commission. That is an impressive story of how the European Commission in a period of 6 years have become quite skillful in practicing this for how they get their work done and how they are now beginning to dare have conversations with citizens so that citizens and the Commission people can work together in finding better solutions and make better policies. I've seen First Nation tribes in Africa, in North America, asking help to come for us to come and train with them and remind them what they already know, but as they're saying, we have forgotten how to practice it. And they're using it to shift very sad circumstances where a lot of young people are committing suicide or ending up in drugs and crime and domestic violence. So this is a way to awaken a community to begin to take responsibility for its youth, and there's a project like that been going on, reasonably successful in British Columbia. There is a lot of this work is going on now in both universities and within school systems around the world, where teachers are learning how to practice this. They're learning and daring begin to use these practices to involve their students, so they're co-learning and co-creating curriculum with students. both on university level and in schools. Israel, Palestine, there's practitioners there that invite Palestinians and Israelis together to come together and listen to each other, and in a hosted environment, so that there can be a safe space in which they can meet, which to them is very dangerous. And for some of them, their own people call them traitors if they meet somebody from the other side, and these people courageously get together, train together, and the hardest they get is simply to meet, because some of them have never met and talked to somebody from the other side since 1948. So it's beginning to be useful also in creating peace and reconciliation, and suggest the possibility of peaceful coexistence for the coming generations. So many wonderful stories, and also, of course, it's hard to get started because we have forgotten these practices, and so they seem awkward and not normal. But I actually think that this is to bring something that is more healthy and bring some normality back that will be useful. Because I think most people, if they were honest enough, would begin to dare admit that many of the meetings and the way we are teaching in our educational institutions are really not working that well. And a lot of meetings are just tiring people, downloading on each other, but the collective intelligence and the collective wisdom is not being brought to bear, and we need that now.
And what does art of hosting make so very special among other methodologies? What are the things that make it so special?
Yeah, I would say that there's 4 practices that we have discovered after having practiced a lot. That one is the art of hosting yourself, to be conscious and have inner strength, and not to be afraid of chaos or fear, your own fear or other people's fear. This is a very dangerous thing in the world. We've begun to become afraid of our own and other people's fear. I think that's what happened in the 30s, and then suddenly fear took over, and we got something none of us would ever want to see ever again on the planet. There is the art of being a student, so that's the second practice, of just being a listener, be curious in life, not have judgments about yourself or others before you meet them. Just be open-hearted and be a student, be a listener, be a participant. Third practice is the skillful courageous stepping up to call, design, host, harvest, and act on conversations around what really matters. And the fourth practice is basically to just live a life of partnership with everybody. So being in co-creative, collaborative attitude in all things. And I think that what makes art of hosting a little bit distinct, not that other people are not doing this, is that we are daring to say you can integrate these practices into one practice. Take care of yourself, be with others, be ready to take leadership when needed, and just be playfully co-creating solutions with others. And that's one of the elements. It's also based in a worldview where some of us are beginning to experience more deeply that everything is already connected. We have just forgotten. So if you somehow awaken a consciousness in yourself and amongst us that we are all part of the same boat, we are all part of the same nature, we are all part of the same universe. Not as a belief system or something we need to convince others of, but just as a basic reality. So those are some of the things, maybe.
And why do we need art of hosting now in our time? Why do we need it so hardly?
Well, that's up to everybody to decide, but if it's so that through skillful and heartfelt hosting of learning space, whether it's through conversation or other ways of learning and listening, is a peace practice that actually can allow us to heal some of the fragmentation and some of the animosity that can exist between grassroots and top-down, or the top, or citizens and government, or between business and grassroots. But there are human beings everywhere trying to do our best. There may be a few very greedy people, but I think there are very few actually. Most people just want everybody else to have a decent life with some good food, some good health, a nice place to live, and a place for our children to grow up and our grandchildren to be taken care of. I mean, that's the same for any human being, and if we could get down to that, I think that's what we need. That will be the meeting point. And these processes can maybe help us go to that level of consciousness and simplicity. And to me, that's one of my understandings of why maybe this is becoming a worldwide accepted basic normal practice for thousands and thousands of people, and it's growing every day. So it's pretty fun.
Thank you very much for the interview.
You're very welcome.